So today we're going to be discussing naming and simplifying polynomials. And so as far as our definitions go, a polynomial is a monomial or sum of monomials. So I know that sounds like a lot, but you know that a monomial is a single term. So like 5x or 3x squared or 7x cubed. Each of those separately are considered to be monomials, so various terms. So an example of a polynomial is a sub n x to the n plus a sub n minus 1 x to the n minus 1 plus blah 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 a sub 1 x to the first power plus a sub 0. What that means is that you have your highest term, then the next highest term, then the next highest, until you get to your lowest term, which is usually a constant, I just bit my tongue, usually a constant but not always. So if this was something like 3x squared plus 4x minus 8, that standard form is considered to be a polynomial in the correct form. You always want to start highest term down to your lowest term. So when we classify polynomials, we classify them by their degree and number of terms. So for your VIX, you want to pay attention to this chart right here. This is super, super important. We classify it first by the degree and then by the number of terms. If you have a 0 degree, which would be something like a constant, which is the number 5 or the number 6 or the number -7, those are all your constants. Your degree is 0 because it's really 5x to the 0 power, but anything raised to a 0 power is 1. So it's 5
Emily,
times
Caitlin's
1.
the main author. Emily, Caitlin's the main author.
They're needed. And that leaves you with 5. So a constant really does have a 0 power, but we never put it. So a constant is going to be, your degree is just, that's what you need to know it as a constant. If you have a degree of 1, you know that that's a linear power. If you have a degree of 2, that's a quadratic. Degree of 3, that's a cubic. So x to the 4th would be a quartic. X to the 5th is a quintic. X to the 6th or higher is a 6th degree polynomial, 7th degree, 8th degree, 9th degree, and so on. For your number of terms, the least you could have is 1 term. If you have 1 term, it's considered to be a monomial. If you have 2 terms, that's a binomial. 3 terms, a trinomial. 4 terms or higher is a polynomial with however many terms. So for our examples, if we had 3x squared minus 5, that's a quadratic because our highest power is 2. So quadratic, and there's 2 terms, so that's a binomial. So a quadratic binomial is how you would label and classify that. For the number 4, 4 happens to be a constant. You don't have a degree of 0. But there is 1 term there. 4 counts as a term, so that is a constant monomial. And you also have 9x to the 5th plus 4x cubed plus 3x squared minus 5x plus 1. It's a mouthful. But your highest term is a 5, so that's a quintic. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 terms, which is higher than all of those. So it is a polynomial with 5 terms. So with these polynomials, we're eventually going to be graphing them, but first we need to know how to simplify them. We can simplify by adding, subtracting, multiplying, and later we'll get to dividing. For now, we're going to focus on adding, subtracting, and multiplying. When you add polynomials, you guys have done this since Algebra 1. You combine like terms. So if you have an example of 3x squared minus 4 plus x plus 5, you simply combine your like terms. You have a 3x squared. Are there any other x squareds? No, so it's a 3x squared. Then your next power would be just the x's. I only have 1 x, so I leave it with the x. But now I have a -4 and a -5, which make -9. For subtracting polynomials, 5x minus 2 minus 4x squared plus 8, don't forget that you have a -1 here. That power gets distributed, that leading coefficient gets distributed to each of those terms. So your highest term is going to be this 4x squared. But because you have a negative in front, that becomes a -4x squared. The only next term I have with an x is the 5x, and that stays. And then I also have this -2 minus 8, which leaves me with a -10. The most difficult one is multiplying polynomials. You have to make sure that you distribute throughout each of your terms. So if I have 2x plus 1 times the quantity 3x squared plus 4x minus 6, you have to make sure that just like foiling, that you distribute to every single one of those terms. So 2x times 3x squared gives you 6x cubed. 2x times 4x is 8x squared, and 2x times negative 6 is minus 12x. But don't forget that you have this other term here as well. So now you have to multiply the positive 1 times each of those terms. So 1 times 3x squared is 3x squared, 1 times 4x is 4x, and 1 times negative 6 is negative 6. And we combine our like terms. So I only have one term that has the highest power of 3, so that's my 6x cubed. But then I have an 8x squared and a 3x squared, makes 11x squareds. And negative 12x plus 4x is a negative 8x, and then minus 6.